Lois's death doesn't He stole her from me! You stole this planet's freedom! It's time to give it back.
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Greetings and salutations, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, the Infuso. And in the past I've spoke about the movie Injustice and how I felt that that movie did an injustice to injustice. Today I would like to take a look back at the actual Injustice series and see what made it so special. And there's a lot to cover because when it comes to the Injustice franchise, there's a lot to love. It's a fighting game in the same vein of Mortal Kombat with some of DC's greatest heroes and villains. And with some of the most famous voices of these characters returning to their roles. You got Kevin Conroy as Batman, Susan Eisenberg as Wonder Woman, George Newbern as Superman, Phil LaMarr as Aquaman, Kari Payton as Cyborg, Richard Epcar as the Joker, Tara Strong as Raven, Tara Strong as Harley Quinn, Mark Ralston as Lex Luthor, the list goes on. But what I'm really here to talk about is the story. A story that was way more intricate and interesting than it had any right being. Injustice is a fighting game, meaning that the story is just window dressing to set up a bunch of battles between villains, heroes, and anti-heroes. The only gameplay there is brutalizing your opponent until they lose a health bar or two. The story exists just to justify fights between capes and cowls. And yet, not only did this game series craft a great story for a fighting game, it also created one of the greatest Justice League stories ever told. Some of the Justice League is transported to an alternate Earth, where they find familiar faces in unfamiliar places. The people are both the same, but completely different. While the heroes at home desperately search for a way to reach out to them and bring them back to their Earth, the rest of the team gets wrapped up in the lore of this Elseworld. A world which is overruled by a Superman gone rogue. A Superman who serves as the Earth's dictator, where he enforces peace through threats. The world follows Supes' orders blindly, either out of admiration or fear. Some both. His former fellow Leaguers are now at his beck and call, doing all his dirty work with very little hesitation. And those who do meet his commands with resistance are met with the same fate a villain would be met with. This Superman has killed the likes of the Joker and Green Arrow alike. This Superman actually burns a hole through Shazam's head. And that's Shazam, who was always a devout follower of Superman, and idolized the guy to a degree. And that's also Shazam, who in actuality is a child. Superman just killed a kid. He has the rest of the Justice League, sans Batman, working as his hired hands. His mindless minions who do his bidding, keeping everyone and everything safe by taking away their free will and rights. If you wanted to see just how far this Superman has fallen from grace, look no further than his hero lineup. He's leading a team that consists of the likes of Black Adam, Bane, Catwoman, Solomon Grundy, Sinestro, Killer Frost, and Doomsday amongst others. Superman's regime leaves behind a reign of terror, badly disguised as heroic harmony. With Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Shazam, Raven, Hawkgirl, Nightwing, The Flash, Cyborg, and Aquaman remaining loyal to the Man of Steel. Almost all these characters have not only become completely compliant to the capital carnage Superman causes, but have worsened in nature on their own. They become outright betrayals of their previous portrayals, in many cases becoming the antithesis of what they stand for. Hal Jordan now not only works alongside his arch nemesis Sinestro, but he's also now a Yellow Lantern himself, which may be one of the brightest looking turns to the dark side I've ever seen. And before anybody says anything, no, this is not Parallax, this is just straight up evil Hal Jordan. Since the death of Lois Lane, Superman and Wonder Woman have become romantically involved, though it's not all it's cracked up to be, as Wonder Woman really is just an afterthought for the Man of Tomorrow, if he ever thought of her to begin with. He spends all his time plotting tomorrow while neglecting his supportive significant other, which is a shame because she is there for him, even if that's not reciprocated. Wonder Woman pushes Superman, but it's never in the right direction. She's very much enabling his bad behavior all throughout, validating his every wrong move and his every bad thought, justifying it while encouraging him to take the next step, to continue to go down this rabbit hole and further tarnish his reputation. In a lot of ways, she feels like the Lady Macbeth of the Injustice universe. I think it's an interesting use of the character just because it's the polar opposite of what you'd expect from Wonder Woman. It's interesting in its own right. I think it's a pretty poor Wonder Woman portrayal overall, though. Aquaman, while still the king of Atlantis, has become entirely subservient to Superman, willingly giving him control over his underwater army and weapons, and allowing Superman to rule over Atlantis in his name. The Nightwing mantle is no longer taken up by Dick Grayson, but now instead by Damian Wayne, Batman's son who actually killed his adopted son before taking over his name and costume. Damian shows no love lost for his dad and treats Superman as a surrogate father figure. All these developments are different from what fans of the property have come to expect, and I think that's what makes it so great. But what's most interesting is that these characters aren't just some evil clones of the original characters. They're the same characters who have just lived different lives, who have had different experiences that have helped shape and mold them into very different people from their other Earth counterparts. We're shown that these characters started off almost identical to the characters we know, sharing a history that is very much the same before it drastically differentiates. This isn't an evil Superman story or a what if Superman was born in Russia story. This is the same Superman of legend, just gone bad. A Superman so overcome with sadness and guilt and grief that it completely corrupted him. A Superman who was tricked by the Joker into taking the lives of his wife and unborn child, as well as inadvertently causing the destruction of all of Metropolis. The Joker tried in vain for years to break the Bat, but he did the unthinkable and managed to make Superman vulnerable. Deeply affected by the loss of all those that he loved, Superman vowed to never allow such chaos to take place again. It's a tragic but true villain origin story that is completely understandable, but still not justifiable in the end. Punishing the perpetrator by punching a hole through the heartless clown's chest, either acting out of revenge or a newfound sense of justice. Superman's hostile takeover isn't for entirely selfish reasons. In his own delusions, he believes he is saving people from themselves, destroying anything that could potentially threaten mandatory peace. Superman sets out to right his wrongs by perfecting mankind in his new image, not realizing that he is being equally catastrophic to mankind all on his own. What's really great about this narrative is that it throws the audience for a loop. Fans of these characters may not be privy to their every move, both because these versions of the characters differ from the ones that they're familiar with, and also due to the severity of the story and the central conflict, which throws everything into complete chaos. Now alliances are formed between good and evil, heroes and villains, villains turned hero, heroes turned villain, characters we know and love and versions of these characters that we've never met. Familiar faces that we are unfamiliar with. Rivalries between allies begin. Friends become foes. Foes become friends. Desperate times call for desperate measures. There's a lot going on. So what I truly love about all of this is just how unpredictable it is. How this series used and utilized beloved characters in a way that's new to the palette. It's distinct and it's different, but most importantly, it's good. You see, it's not enough to just defy expectations. You have to make sure that what you're making is something good enough on its own right that it makes it worth it to defy that expectation. And I think this series did just that. And it did so with the safety net of the multiverse. I love the story of Superman souring on his old ways and values, becoming corrupted. At least conceptually, I love it. As an Elseworld tale, I think this makes for a really challenging threat for the heroes and a really tragic and compelling origin story for Superman. The great savior becoming the greatest threat. You know, it falls in line with that age-old phrase. What was it? How did it go?
You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Oh, right. However, where I think this plot point really falls apart entirely is that by having Superman go rogue following the death of Lois Lane, it kind of tarnishes Superman. And it creates this flawed sense that Lois Lane is what ties him to humanity. I really hate this notion because Lois Lane isn't Superman's only in civilization. She's not this overwhelming force of good that compels Superman to follow suit and do good deeds. I loathe this story beat because it makes it seem like Superman was always on the verge of snapping. That deep down he was always this dictator-inspired, power-hungry madman who wanted to enslave society to keep the peace. And Lois Lane, while being a very vital part in Superman's story, while being the love of his life, the mother of his children, someone who possibly grounded him, is not his defining humanizing trait. If Lois Lane was taken out of the equation, it should lead to a sad Superman, not a bad Superman. Look, I'm not saying that this symbol of hope is beyond being corrupted. He's not. Nobody is. Not even Superman. But why is that good side of him so impossible to reach when it is his defining attribute? Even through all the bad things that he's doing, he never second guesses himself or questions his own actions. He's shown the error of his ways multiple times from various parties, and yet he refuses to even slightly budge. Where are his parents' teachings, both biological and adopted? Where's his natural good nature and energy? Everything he ever stood for. I know that he's gaslit himself into believing that he still stands for those things, but, his actions determine otherwise and undermine his actual cause. I think ideally a sign of good should still on occasion come through with this performance. I just don't like the idea that without Lois Lane, Superman's just an aggressive, angry abuser whose wrath knows no bounds. That's a really dangerous precedent to set for the character. And in some ways, it feels like this exact school of thought has been carried over into other Superman media. It's a really poor depiction of Superman. I know that there's a little bit more to it than that. Superman kind of emphasizes the trauma he feels in this exchange.
I could have prevented Metropolis, saved my family. Crime took my family too, Clark. If you weren't the gun.
Showing that for all the pain Bruce has suffered, losing all that he's lost to various criminal activity over the years, he was never made the instrument which took the lives of those he loved. Superman not only has to deal with the trauma and pain that comes from losing a partner and child, but also feels an incredible sense of guilt in being used to take those lives. I understand that there's more to it than just that. His entire city and everyone he made a connection with who didn't wear a cape pretty much died due to his own actions, even if he wasn't in control of them. Both his wife and unborn child essentially died at his own hands. I can understand how feeling entirely powerless in such a severe situation could alter Superman's mindset. How it could make him double down on his power to make sure that both he and everyone else could never be put in such a vulnerable situation again. There's some merit there. I just think the turn was too sudden and sinister. There was no subtlety, there was just instant dictator. Regardless, while making Superman a violent and vicious killer in an Elseworld tale is certainly interesting, since then it's become a very overused what-if trope that a lot of continuities like to toy with. And almost each and every time, it's because something bad happened to Lois. I think this plot point either needs to go in future projects or just needs to be better detailed. Because it really does give off the vibe that without Lois Lane, Superman's just, essentially evil. In comparison to the big bads, the good guys are far and few between. The insurgency is much smaller in quantity, but still packed in quality. This world's Batman works alongside a never-been-bad Lex Luthor, a chaotic neutral Deathstroke, and confusingly enough, Harley Quinn. Now, Harley is where I think this story starts to lose the plot, or at least this character in the story did. This Harley has joined the Resistance. She's now one of the good guys. She's not even referred to as Harley anymore. This is Harleen Quinn. She's no longer part of the problem and is passionate about the cause. She's out to do the right thing. Kinda. Because as soon as Harleen sets her sights on Earth 1's Joker, she's immediately back under his spell again, completely rejecting her 5-year-long hero career in favor of immediately going back to being Joker's henchman. Furthermore, it's shown that she's been running Joker gangs in his name. So how much of a hero could she really be? I mean, look, I get it. This Harley stayed devoted to the Joker until his passing. And they didn't even have an official falling out before he fell out off this earth. But in my personal opinion, I don't think a Harley redemption story works without her confronting her past behaviors and her enabler/groomer. Without a proper falling out with the Joker and a disavowing of self, the whole hero Harley shtick just feels incredibly hollow and insincere. I think the indecisiveness in the character is warranted, character-wise at least. Having her stuck between helping Batman or the Joker is a really interesting crossroads to find the character at. But I feel like it's a plot that shouldn't have been included in the story. There's already far too much going on to properly explore this angle and tell a solid story with it. So it becomes a story beat that makes Harley feel incredibly underdeveloped, unchanged in spite of changes being made, and just overall very flaky when it comes to allegiances. It always bothered me, especially with how the follow-up game kind of portrays her relationship with the Joker, and actually just her in general. It all makes her feel incredibly inconsistent. So this may be one of my least favorite takes on the character. I have mixed feelings about the design because at least they did something different. They took her original design and tried to go a different route with it, so I respect it. It's certainly more creative than just giving her pigtails and then throwing her in shorts. They have Tara Strong voicing Harley here, but you could hardly tell. She's playing this version of the character a lot more tame than the Harley she typically plays, and I just don't think it does her any favors. She also plays the voice of Raven, which she also does in the Teen Titans shows, but it also sounds nothing like her previous performances of the character, and it's just not anything to write home about. It's weird saying all this about Tara Strong of all people, because I'm not saying that she's not good, I'm saying that she's not great here. And that we all know that she could do better, because, she has. I'm sure a lot of that goes to direction, and I just don't understand the direction for either character. This Lex Luthor is definitely an interesting take on the character. Seeing a Lex who never took up a life of crime and instead took a stand against it in private feels like unexplored territory with this character, who is aiding the heroes while still chumming it up with the villains. In this telling of the tale, he's close friends with Superman, and keeps his alliance with the community looking to take him down a secret. I guess it makes sense to have a good Lex Luthor because I think no matter what, Lex has to serve as the narrative's anti-Clark, his complete opposite in every way. So if Superman is an evil dictator, I guess reasonably that would make Lex Luthor a hero. Anyway, for the most part, that's our hero lineup. They're of course joined by Earth 1's Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, Batman, Cyborg, and ultimately Superman, as well as their world's Flash. Now, given what they're up against, you might think, oh, wait a second. How could you have a fighting game with all of these characters? Green Arrow clearly wouldn't be able to square up against Superman. A few punches and he's gone. While most games would expect you to just accept the gameplay and ignore the logic, this game actually goes out of its way to try to justify that plot point as well, by giving the team and also its adversaries performance enhancers. Yup, everyone's just on Superman super steroids. It's dumb, sure, but it's also something. I think there's something really engrossing watching these dueling duplicates. Seeing two separate iterations of these characters conflict and clash helps better compare and contrast them. Their physical altercations with self are brought on by everything from differing ideologies and alliances to someone just beating themselves up because they're too stubborn for their own good. As Batman actually goes toe-to-toe with Batman, who wants to send Batman home and not let him save himself, despite the fact that Batman has actually already saved Batman once before.
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
I know none of what I just said made sense, but I promise you it's entirely accurate. There seems to be a formula for these fights where man versus man meets man versus self. Person 1A meets person 1B, tries to give them perspective and show them the error of their ways. Their words fall on their own deaf ears, and we get a playthrough of, why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself? But I really enjoy these moments nonetheless. For your standard fighting game, I think the story offers up a lot of thought-provoking questions about life. Like, what is the cost of peace? To what ends would you think justifiable for universal harmony? Would it even count if it's mandated? What does it mean to be good? Is it all just perception? How much can the mind twist and turn to cope with reality? What makes a person? With the copies going head-to-head, it really shows how certain events can shape and reshape people. These characters, and I guess people in general, are really just a summation of personal trauma and how it affected them. Which is why these characters, while being the same, in a lot of cases are entirely different. It sounds like an oxymoron, but I promise you it's not. And you know what? I think all of that is kind of beautiful and poetic. I really love the ending, seeing the team defy the odds and unite several others to triumph over the big threat. I love the world building all throughout, and I don't think it's a wonder why it's extended past this. Ultimately, I still think this game really holds up. I gotta say, I love it much more just because typically in games like this, storytelling is either secondary or non-existent. But Injustice paid just as much attention to the game's plot as they did to the gameplay. This is one of my favorite Justice League stories ever told, and one of my favorite DC video games. It was an instant classic, and I think just about everyone at the time knew it. The story's great, the gameplay, which I didn't talk too much about, mainly because I'm not a gaming YouTuber, is a lot of fun. It's entertaining, especially if you have company, but you can play it on your own and still have a good time. With all that being said, if you like this video and would be interested in seeing me talk about the game's follow-up, Injustice 2, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
"An injustice anywhere is an injustice."
I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.